All right, so let's go ahead and jump into our presentation for today. I want to welcome you to our Webinar Wednesday presentation. Today is an e-learning topic, specifically on Enterprise PDM and what's new in the 2014 version of Enterprise PDM. And my name is Jordan Lemley, and I'm an applications engineer here with Hawkridge Systems, working in the data management division. And what I want to talk to you today about is simply the best of what is new in Enterprise PDM. So there's a lot of new features in EPDM 2014, and I want to kind of summarize what I think are the key things, the key takeaways for added functionality in Enterprise PDM for the 2014 release. So because Enterprise PDM is a SOLIDWORKS product, the main idea is that because SOLIDWORKS is focused on being a user-friendly software solution, Enterprise PDM also is focused on that same idea of making it easier on the users in their day-to-day interactions with the system. And so that's kind of the tone that's been set with the new additions into EPDM to make it easier on the admin, easier on the end users. And we're going to talk a little bit about what specifically has changed in the new update to the software. And if you have questions during the presentation, feel free to go ahead and ask a question in the question dialog box on your webinar interface, and I'll try and get to those at the end of the presentation. We should be relatively quick on this presentation. It should last about 30 minutes or so, I would imagine, and then I'll have time for questions at the end. So just a little update on what to expect, and without further ado, we can go ahead and jump right into the presentation. So let's take a look at what are the new features. What are the new things that have been added into Enterprise PDM for the 2014 release? So there's quite a few new features, and I've kind of summarized the main ones here under this new features. So for one, we've got an automated cache management system so that you can easily refresh a cache or manage the files that you have locally. The checkout and change state dialog box has changed a little bit with a lot more functionality and added features, and we'll talk about the specifics there. There's been a consolidation of delayed in state notifications, so you don't receive a big, huge chunk of delayed in state notifications. They all get consolidated into one notification message, which is really nice. And then there's the ability to customize columns, whether that's in change state or checkout dialog box or the contains tab, and we'll take a look at that. We've got a version comparison added into our SOLIDWORKS Enterprise PDM task add-in in the SOLIDWORKS interface. And then we've also got a new feature that allows for a flexible always work with latest versions. So that's a really interesting one. And then probably the most significant addition to the 2014 release of Enterprise PDM is definitely the Microsoft Office add-in, which if you haven't heard about, is really cool, and we'll talk about that. So let's take the first one on, automated cache management. So I'm going to go into the admin interface and kind of show you what this cache management is talking about. So I'm going to open up my admin tool here. And what they've added here in the user settings is a new option that you might not have seen if you're not on 2014, is this cache options. And what this allows us to do is specify a particular folder and say, maybe this library folder needs to either be cleared when a user logs out of the vault, or it needs to be refreshed every time the user logs back in. So for example, if you wanted to use the clear cache during logout, that might be useful if you wanted to keep local files off of your hard drive and keep that relatively clear out some big files off your hard drive every time that you log out of the vault. Or maybe for security reasons, you don't want users to ever have access to files offline, or you don't want users to have any files locally after they've logged out. You just want to keep those cleared out of the cache every time the user logs out. So that option is there now. And then there's another option called refresh cache during login, which is really useful if you have a shared location, such as a library folder, where you are maybe updating some of the files and a user has logged in, added some of those files locally, maybe a shared SOLIDWORKS toolbox part, and a new version is added into the vault, but the user only has the previous version, maybe version 2 out of 3 in their local view. And so what refresh cache during login will do is it will clear the local cache and always get the latest version for that folder, so that you're always working with the latest version of maybe a shared library of shared parts in the vault. And so we'll take a look at how that actually works real quick. So for example, I've got a folder in here, a library folder, and what I'm going to do is use this checkbox, clear cache during logout, and we'll take a look at what that will do in the interface. Let me actually do that for the admin, which is the user I'm going to be using. So cache, and then I'll choose the particular location. So I've got this folder, clear cache during logout. And so we'll take a look at that folder real quick. So you can see that I've got the local versions sitting here, and what logging out will do is it'll clear that local cache automatically for me. So when I log out of the vault, these will no longer be residing on my local view. So I'll go ahead and log off this test vault, and then I'll log back in, and what we should see is that that folder has been automatically cleared because of the settings, those new settings. So if I take a look at some of these files, you'll see that it now has that red X indicating that it's been cleared out of the local cache. And if I want those back, I can either get the latest version, or I can go back into the settings and say refresh the local cache for that folder. And it will automatically refresh with the latest version. So that's a really cool new feature to kind of automate some of your admin interface and help the users to work more effectively inside EPDM. All right. So that's the automated cache management. Now let's take a look at what's changed with the checkout and change state dialog box in EPDM. Okay. So I'm going to dig into one of these folders here and just take a look at one of these assemblies and try and change the state on it. Right-click, change state, maybe pass for initial approval. And there's a few things in here that are new inside the dialog box. First thing you'll notice is that the comments boxes have flipped orientation, so that they're longer in width than they were before. Another thing that you'll notice is there's a new button here for warnings. So you can scroll through the warnings on your list just by clicking on one of these buttons, so that you can scroll through all the warnings in your transition or your checkout dialog box, so that you can quickly navigate to the files that need your attention. So for example, I have a file that's in the wrong state, so it's not obviously going to move from a state that it's not going to move to initial approval because it's sitting at concept right now. So it's obviously not going to move. Another thing that has been added as well is the option to show reference selection controls. So what this does is it allows you to select a a particular assembly and all of its subcomponents or children. So for example, instead of going through and selecting individually each one of these subcomponents as well as the top level assembly, what I can do is simply check this extra checkbox right next to my assembly, and it will automatically select or deselect all children of that particular assembly. So that's a really useful feature if you are wanting to dig down on specific assemblies and just choose those for either selection or deselection. So that's a nice little feature that they added in 2014. And that's just simply a right click and choosing this show reference selection controls. All right, and another new feature as well with this check-in dialog box is your ability to add columns into the check-in dialog. So for example, if I've got a particular location, let's say I've got my grill assembly and I want to check out this file, what I can do is right-click on the column set, and you've got your typical columns here. You got file name and result, checkout, get, all of that. But what's been added in 2014 is the ability to right-click on these columns and simply go in and click to add more information to your checkout dialog box. So for example, all of the variables that I have listed in my vault can be added to this column set. So for example, I've got these file names that are just using a dumb number system and aren't very descriptive. I can choose to add my description to my column set. And so now I can take a look at that description and have a much better understanding of what these files are by adding that column into the checkout dialog box. So that's really nifty as well. And then one last thing is the ability to use a filter on your list of names for approvers when you have dynamic selection enabled for a notification. So if you're trying to send a notification to a particular person and your list is really long, this filter option is going to help you by allowing you to search through all of those usernames. So if I type in O, it'll find anything with an O in the name, whether that's in the middle or at the beginning. The wildcards are implied. So I can search for anything that has this criteria in the filter dialog. So that's really useful if you've got a long list of users in your dynamic notification list. So super useful, kind of the day-to-day maybe pet peeves that are throwing you for a loop sometimes, kind of getting addressed. And so that's what enhancement requests are for. So if you've ever added an enhancement request, do know that they look at those and that they add those based on user input, because obviously the end users are the most important part of our software. So making sure that you guys are happy is our main priority, and if you submit those enhancement requests, those can be added to new versions of the software, which is a really cool thing. All right. So that was the checkout and change state dialog box. The next addition to Enterprise PDM 2014 is consolidated delayed and state notifications. So if you've ever gotten a notification set for a file that's been sitting at a particular workflow state for a while, maybe it's been sitting at in review or pending approval or some state like that for a certain number of days, you'll get a notification. And what you would have noticed is that you receive a bunch of notifications an individual notification for each file that is sitting at that state. So if you have lots of files that are pending review, then you're going to have lots of notifications, and those can be somewhat overwhelming. And what they've done in 2014 is actually consolidated all those delayed in state notifications into one notification. So if I go to my inbox for EPDM, we can take a look at that delayed in state notification. So for example, if I take a look at my test fault, I've got this notification that is basically summarizing all the files that are sitting in initial review as I've set it up. So they've been sitting in initial review for 86 days, and it lists all the files that are in the vault that have been sitting in that state that I specified to receive a notification about. So I'm aware of all of those, and it's all in one notification, so I don't have separate notifications for each one of these, which is super helpful. It helps you to kind of visualize what needs your attention and not flood your inbox with unnecessary notifications or emails. So that's super helpful as well. All right, customized columns is next. Let's take a look at that. So what we saw earlier was your ability to change the columns headers for check-in and check-out dialog boxes. And what they've added is actually the same thing for the Contains tab. So I can come into this Contains tab now and right-click and add more categories or columns to my Contains tab. So any information that is stored in a variable or custom property that's mapped to a variable can now be displayed in my Contains tab. It's all up to you as the user what you want to see. So for example, if I again have these dumb numbers and I want to add a description, I can simply add that as a column, and then as the user drag this description column over here so that I can see what this name of the file is and get a good idea for what this means, because this dumb number might be indiscernible to me if there's no smart numbering to it, which is super useful. And then also they've added the ability to click on these up and down arrows. Accidentally clicked on that. It's okay. Just close that. Okay. So you can click on the up and down, collapse, and expand in the Contains tab. So if you have a huge assembly with lots of subcomponents and assemblies, you can kind of navigate through there using those collapsible arrows, which you couldn't before. So that's pretty nice. All right. Now let's take a look at version comparison. This is new in the SOLIDWORKS interface. So let me pull over an assembly that I've got here. So what you'll notice over here is I've got a new column in my add-in for SOLIDWORKS. Originally you had the version number, which tells you which version you're working with and out of which version is it. So for example, am I working with version 7 out of 7, or am I working with version 2 out of 3 on this particular assembly? And what you wouldn't be able to know previously is what was the reference previously. So you might have grabbed the latest version, maybe 5 out of 5, but maybe the old assembly was referencing version 3 out of 5 and not 4 out of 5. And so you wouldn't know that information without this new reference version column that they added. So basically the reference version column just allows you to see what was the referenced version when this file was last checked in. And then the version number over here just indicates what you have currently open. So this allows you to see what you have now and what was it before. So that's really nice if you wanted to see maybe what version was referenced previously. So for example, if I just get a previous version of this particular assembly, or not assembly, but part. You'll see that it's referencing version 2 out of 4, but because I was referencing 4 in my previous assembly, I see that here has not updated because obviously the last time it was checked in, it referenced version 4. And if I check this assembly in now, it'll be version 2 out of 4, and when I open it again, the reference version will say 2 out of 4 once I save it. So that's what that's doing, and that's new in 2014 as well. Okay, moving right along. All right, second to last, we've got flexible, always work with latest version settings. So that might be a little confusing, but what it means is, let's say that you had the option enabled that limited users to only being able to work with the latest version. Maybe you've got manufacturing or engineers need to always work with the latest version, which is nice, and that allows you to make sure that you're always working with the latest and not using old designs before they get sent to manufacturing or before it gets too far along in the design process. But what that can do is limit your users' flexibility in being able to recall a previous version if they needed to. It's because then you have to go back into the user settings and say, hey, we're going to allow them to work with older versions, but maybe only temporarily, and that might require some interface with the admin. What they did in 2014 was actually add some flexibility there. So if I take a look at the admin tool and take a look at the user settings, if I go down here to settings and take a look at reference dialog, here's my option, always work with latest version of files. And so that will prevent the user from using previous versions, which could be frustrating if you were wanting to use an older version. And so what they added in 2014 is this new option, enable the get version command in SOLIDWORKS Addin. And so what that allows you to do is always work with the latest version. So you check a file out and it automatically gets the latest versions of your files and doesn't allow you to use any previous versions, only the latest. But what it allows you to do is once that's open in SOLIDWORKS, but not in any other interface, just in the SOLIDWORKS add-in, you can actually use the get version command in that SOLIDWORKS add-in to go back. So you always by default have the latest version, but if you need to, you can go back and get a previous version. So for example, I can come into this assembly and it gets the latest version, but I can still, in this add-in, go to get version and pull up that previous version and grab it from the vault. So I have that flexibility to get another version if I wanted to. So that's pretty nice. All right. Now, here's the big feature that's been added in Enterprise PDM 2014, the Microsoft Office add-in. So I know a lot of people have been waiting for this, and it's time to go take a look at what has EPDM done with Microsoft Office. So we know that Enterprise PDM has the add-in for SOLIDWORKS. We see that here in the task pane. It's nice. It's got this good functionality where you can get a latest version, check a file in and out without ever leaving the SOLIDWORKS interface. Now, wouldn't that be nice if they had the same thing for Microsoft Office? And the good news is that with 2014, they've added that. So now, if I go into a folder and take a look at a document, what I used to do was maybe I would accidentally not check the file out. I just double click on this Word document, or maybe you've seen another user do something similar where they just double click on it and they forget that this file is read-only. They forget to check it out. And so they go in and they start making changes to it, and maybe add some sort of reason on this ECO document, saying that design is no longer viable, something to that effect. Now all of a sudden they go to save this document into the vault. And they realize, uh-oh, I didn't check it out. So now the only option I have is to save it as a different name, because it's not going to let me save it over because they haven't checked the file out. And there's that whole process where you can manually save it out as another file name, check the document out, and then overwrite the version locally and then check it back in, and that can be kind of tedious. It's a workaround and it works, but it would be really nice if you could just take those changes that you've made and check it out within the EPDM interface. And what this Office add-in allows us to do is it adds a tab into your Microsoft Office documents, and this is for Microsoft Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, and just those documents, not necessarily all documents. And this is for 2007, Microsoft Office 2007 and later. And this works with Enterprise PDM 2013 and 2014. So that's some of the functionality for this add-in, and it's a separate download. It's not contained within the download media from EPDM. So if you go to the customer portal for Enterprise PDM, or for SOLIDWORKS in general, solidworks.com, and then go to the customer portal, you can download this from the downloads page, just where you download new versions of SOLIDWORKS, new versions of EPDM. There's another download, a separate download there called Enterprise PDM Add-in, and that's what you download. And you want to make sure that this download is the correct version. So it'll have a 32-bit version and a 64-bit version. And that's not referring to it's not referring to your operating system. It's actually referring to which version of Microsoft Office that you have. So for example, you can have 32-bit Microsoft Office running on your 64-bit computer, and you don't want to download the 64-bit, you want to download the 32-bit. And if you're wondering which version do I have in 2007, you can simply go to the File, Help, and it'll tell you right here. You see that I'm working with a 32-bit Office in a 64-bit environment. So you want to make sure you download that right version and then add it to your Microsoft Office documents. But this is a really cool feature. So now I can go to this Enterprise PDM tab, and I've got all of the EPDM functionality that I saw earlier in my task add-in, my task pane add-in in SOLIDWORKS, but within Office. So I've made these changes to this Word document, and I can simply check the file out. And it opens it up. And now it's no longer read-only, and those changes are there, and I can check this back in. Say added information. And I've added that new version of my file. You see that it's now version 2 out of 2 instead of 1 out of 1. I made those changes. I can see the data card, change the state, get a previous version, show this in Explorer. So many options here in the EPDM interface. So that's really useful if you've run into that problem where you've edited a Word document or an Office document and forgot to check it out. This just allows you to check it right out from the Office interface and make those changes, check it back in, never leaving Microsoft Office, never having to go navigate into the vault. So definitely a game changer here for Microsoft Office documents and handling those in Enterprise PDM. All right, so that is the conclusion of the best features in Enterprise PDM 2014, what I think are probably the most useful out of the new features for the new release. And that includes the automated cache management. We talked about that, refreshing or clearing the cache on login and logout. Being able to change and add functionality to checkout and change state dialog boxes, adding columns, being able to flip through the warnings and the ability to filter through dynamic notifications. Consolidated delayed and state notifications, being able to combine those all into one single notification. And then customized columns, allowing you to add descriptions and any other variables that you want into the column set in contains or in your dialog box. Being able to run a version comparison, seeing a previous version that was used in the assembly and seeing that in your EPDM add-in into SOLIDWORKS. And then flexible, always work with latest versions. So allowing you to work with the latest version, but that added flexibility of being able to get the previous version if you really need to. And then the biggest add-in or the biggest change, I think, in 2014, the Microsoft Office add-in. So definitely some really cool new features in Enterprise PDM 2014. And with that, I'll go ahead and conclude our presentation. I want to thank you for attending today's Hawkridge Systems Webinar Wednesday e-learning series on Enterprise PDM, what's new in 2014. And I appreciate your time, and hopefully this was informative for you and kind of helps you understand what's new and gets you excited for the new release.